Hello and welcome to the No Boss Podcast. I'm your host, Patrick McDonald. With me, co-hosts Finn McDonald and Sheldon Kaufman. Today is a special episode. This is our first football episode in general, but this is a college football episode. Um, Typically, we aren't going to cover football too much on this podcast, but college football playoff, the teams who made the playoffs have been announced today. So we are going to react to the announcement. We're going to talk first about what we think the criteria stuff should be like. We have not seen the announcements yet, so we're going to find that out live on this show, and we're going to give a live reaction to it. So first, I'll throw this one out to any of y'all. Do y'all have any big criteria stuff that you guys want to talk about?
Yes.
Okay.
Strength of schedule. A team that has not played anybody should not be in the playoffs.
Okay, Fen. Let's. Oh, I want to hear the specifics you're talking about here.
I'm talking about Miami's schedule. They have not played a single ranked team, and they have 2 losses. I don't think that's good enough to make the cut.
Okay. Yeah, that's a fair assessment. Let's. Sheldon, you got your point here. I'll let you go.
Yeah, I'd just say thing that I think the committee should be taking into consideration is head-to-head matchups and also same opponent matchups for sure. Especially when we're talking about a bunch of these SEC schools, some of them that have played each other, and also some of them that have played similar opponents. And look at how they played those opponents if they haven't played each other yet. I think that's a pretty decent way to look at it when you're trying to compare two teams, and we have the luxury of being able to compare multiple teams in the same conference, being the SEC. So it's going to be a lot to. It's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out. But I definitely agree with Finn's point with Miami. I this might be one of the more fraudulent teams if they make it, just because they really haven't played anyone, like Finn said, and their 2 losses were to Syracuse and Georgia Tech. And I mean, you look at those teams; they're pretty good, but they're no Ohio State, Penn State, or not Michigan, like Tennessee, Georgia, like Finn said, strength of schedule definitely should be taken into consideration as well.
Mm-hmm.
Heck, I want to see them play a ranked SEC team in a bowl game. I bet you they lose.
Okay. Strong
Yeah, there's
sure
a lot of
here.
questions about Miami for sure.
Let me throw this question out for y'all. In a sport, I feel like college football is very unique in the fact that there's so many teams possible, right? In all professional sports, there's 30 to 32 teams. In college football, how many? 100, what?
132, 141,
132.
something like that.
I'd believe any of those numbers. There's so many possibilities. Very little teams are going to play a full schedule of top of the tier competitiveness. Do all SEC schools don't even play all SEC schools? So it's really hard to just say, hey, based off of what conference you're in, you're going to have a stronger strength of schedule than somebody in a weaker conference. Also, with how many teams there are, like college football has so much bigger of a gap than the worst team in college football. And I don't think that being compared to any other league in American sports. And I feel like that makes college football playoffs for me like the most interesting thing, because it's really hard how you don't just give the best 12 teams a playoff spot regardless of their record. For me, because that's how I see it. They have the rule now of 4 of the best conference winners are going to make the playoff. Um, that's a big thing. Any other like huge things here between you guys? Even teams, specific teams.
I want to talk on that last point. So let's just say Clemson wins the ACC championship. Why should they deserve to get in over the Gamecocks who beat them head to head, or Old Miss who crushed the team that beat them head to head?
That I don't know because they are
I don't think they should.
they're one of the four best um division leaders. That's why. That's
I mean,
uh
if you look at a case like Clemson, like I mean, yes, that does make sense. But also, if they were to win the ACC championship, it would be against a SMU team, a really good SMU team at 8. And I think their only loss this year was to BYU by like 3 points when and that was on the road. So it'd be super impressive to me if Clemson could even pull off that kind of victory. I really don't think they will, but yeah, that's just the way it is. Like usually the best four conference, like the Power Four conference winners, are pretty damn good. We're seeing instances like in the Big 12 where it's not the case, where there's a lot of teams kind of going for that at large bid, or not that large bid, but the conference championship bid. And a lot of people think the Big 12 is pretty weak this year, and that they shouldn't even deserve to be in the playoffs. But a team that could be a little dark horse is ASU if they can pull off a win on Saturday in the Big 12. I really like what they're doing down there in Phoenix. I think they're in Phoenix. Uh, Sam Levitt is a really good quarterback. They have a great run game with Cameron Scadaboo, one of the better running backs in the FBS. They have a good defense. They played some tough teams. They're pretty battle tested, and it could be they can make a little run. Um, but yeah, that's kind of my like justification on why it's like that.
for sure. Let me ask you guys this. How do you feel the previous season's maybe uproar about the decisions, specifically with FSU being excluded last year out of the top four? Like, how do you feel like that will overlay into the decision making this year?
Finn, you want to go first, or?
I definitely think it'll factor in that they'll go based off of stuff other than necessarily just record. Kind of like how they did it. I agreed with the move. Factor in that FSU's, in a sense, all-star quarterback was out for the year.
Yeah. How do y'all feel in general on injuries, factoring in injuries?
I mean, it just depends. Like when you lose a guy like Jordan Travis, I mean, obviously it's going to factor a lot more than when you lose maybe a wide receiver too, or your star wide receiver, because you still have guys that can come up and make plays. Uh, Back to the first question you asked, I think that situation that happened just highlighted the need for a 12-team playoff, and like Finn said, it kind of showed that the committee is not gonna just look at strictly record and they factor in other things. Um, but yeah.
Yeah. How do y'all feel about potentially we go to a relative point differential? So if I had to describe this, let's say you have a strong schedule and your record, let's say it's at this point it's 9-3, but you have a really strong point differential because you played those 2 games close, or those 3 games that you lost really close. You played against really good teams all season, and relative to the league, you played those teams really well. I feel like there are enough smart people with graphing calculators to where we can make a more convincing formula than just stacking up records, stacking up conferences. Um, how would y'all feel if there was some type of relative point differential formula developed, helping decide decisions like this?
Well, there was I may be wrong on this because I don't know what like the exact formula was, but we did have that with the before the playoff era happened with the committee. It was the BCS, right? And it factored in like a bunch of stuff. like wins. It had I don't know what the specific things were, and that was like a whole mess. Like I think everyone hated it. It was like the whole reason the 14 playoff even happened and why we have a committee. I think that we shouldn't go towards like a formula or a system computer wise. I think that maybe we should get better people in the committee. I don't even know who's on the committee, but um, but I think that they should factor in the things that you're talking about with point differential. Something that I talked about earlier with when you play same like opponents, how did you face off against them? What was your combined record? Or how much did you score? How much did you outscore opponents by in similar conferences? Stuff like that should be considered within the committee. But I think that we should still keep it personalized or humanized and not goes to like the machine, because I feel like that just creates a whole mess where no one's going to be happy. And yeah,
I feel like it should be somewhere in the middle. I feel like we should keep the committee, but get the machine and have the machine do the math for the committee to consider.
Like the committee will decide a short list of, let's say, 25 teams, and then between those 25 teams, we let the formula take over.
I would not be opposed to that.
Okay, that's a possibility. First year here of the expanded playoff. How do we feel about the current system, the current format, and how do we feel about maybe expanding further with how many teams make it compared to how many teams are in the entirety of college football?
I'd like to see the regular season expanded, and I'd like to see, instead of our top 4 teams having a bye, I'd like to see it be a 16-team playoff.
Okay. In that situation, are we creating a whole new level, like is often proposed, taking, let's say, the SEC, ACC, Power 5, all the Power 5 schools, we get rid of some of the lower ranking Division 1 schools, or are we taking just the powerhouses? Maybe we do more of a relegation style, like in overseas football, like that being soccer, football. How do we feel about creating a new league, going more relegation style? Like, how do you guys think?
I'm gonna be honest, that don't even really sound like college football to me. So hopefully that really doesn't happen, because that just sounds like taking away conferences would be crazy. I think relegation. Yeah, I think that we should just keep it. I think the playoff style right now is good. I think we should see how it pans out for like 5-6 years. If we do need to expand it to 16 teams, I think that'd be the next step to go in. I'm a little worried that if we keep expanding it, the regular season games will like literally not really matter, and like big games will be um, not magnified as much and put more under microscopes, because like who cares? Because if they lose, they can lose 4 more and still make it. But I wouldn't. I would definitely not be opposed to a 16-team
They
playoff.
still matter. You can only lose 3 of them and still make it in that top, 16.
Yeah, no, I. That's what I'm saying. I think that if they do expand, they should go to 16 teams.
I
But
wouldn't be in favor of any further. I just don't like that there's a bye involved.
okay, yeah,
I
or
like
maybe just
seeing
more
those.
eliminating
I like
buys in
seeing
the
those
format.
upsets. I'd like to see the number 16 team in the country beat Oregon in the playoffs. That's
Yeah,
what I like about March Madness every year.
Even more with how little games are played. Uh, we always in sports analysts we talk about sample size. You understand that with this, there's going to be standard deviation game to game. Let's say your one big game, you have by far your worst game of the season. Like the one that matters the most is the game you perform worst in. But overall, your sample size is there. So how do we feel? Maybe in that aspect, like, do we think that in a sport that is very volatile, do you think we are working too much off of small sample sizes?
I don't, because what else do we have to work on? We have to pick these teams off of something.
That's true.
I would say that, yeah, it's tough because you can do that, and then you could also because there's definitely teams that are going to be trying to get a playoff spot that have done things that you have said, Patrick. We look at teams like Alabama who have performed badly against teams. They lost to Vanderbilt. Ole Miss has played some pretty bad games. They're vying for a spot. Miami has as well. I don't know. I don't know if we, but also like Finn says, what else do we have to go on? When you play big teams and you don't perform, that shows that you can't perform in big games, i.e., the playoffs, right? So I think that you should just look at what happens if you play a team close, because most of these teams that have those bad losses, they also have like good wins, competitive games against really good teams, stuff like that. But I think you kind of have to take it situationally, probably.
Okay.
That
Uh,
makes sense.
yeah, that does make a lot of sense. Um, Furthering on that, like let's say somebody is playing one of their bigger games, their starting quarterback's hurt for that game. How do we feel like using that game? Like let's say that their two biggest games of the season against what are supposed to be their two toughest opponents, they don't have their starting quarterback, or let's say a good portion of their defense is out with COVID. Like how do we feel about ranking uh, in those situations? Um, which doesn't apply to this year, really, I don't think. But how do you guys generally feel about how the current system would advocate for those type of situations?
I feel like the human aspect would definitely factor with them taking into account the injury to FSU. I think it would kind of be in the reverse. Those losses would not weigh as much as they would have if the team was healthy. They would still
Yeah.
weigh, but not as much.
Mm-hmm. Because health is a big part of this. We see it all the time in professional sports. Like the teams that are healthy are going to win games, regardless of the talent. A lot of the time, um, obviously, there's a magnitude to the talent that is hurt that matters. But
I
healthy
mean, we saw
teams,
the not that healthy Dodgers win the World Series.
yeah. Too bad. Like the rest of the roster was, they lose their 4 through 8 starters. At least they still have the top guys. Um, Obviously, they didn't have Glass now, but
They had a
um,
top-tier pitching rotation on the IL. I think won the World Series.
yeah. Um, I'll definitely have another question to pop up. Do you guys have any other like big things that y'all want to talk on? I'm sure you guys do.
I think I think we want to see the rankings first, right, Finn? Before we talk about it, or do you have something you want to say first?
I would like to see more non-conference games played.
I agree. Because specifically, if we're going to be prioritizing certain conference wins over certain other conferences, like we need to see a lot of inter-conference games to really determine what conferences are better than the other ones.
I would have liked to see Clemson play a couple of SEC schools.
Dabo would never schedule that. He's too much of a bitch. He
and
couldn't do that.
an
I don't
important
think Dabo picks the schedule. I'm pretty sure the schedules are picked.
He has
no
he has to say he has to say in it. He
an
definitely has to
important
say
part
in
to
it.
think about here is the teams, not the players obviously, but the people in charge of these teams make their own schedule, right?
Yeah.
So they're picking their own essentially they're picking their own destiny, but they don't know how their decisions will affect their destiny at the end of the year. I think that's an important part. I think if there was more of a universalization of this into more of a league rather than an association, um,
I
I
think it
think,
needs to be like a league where the league will pick the schedule.
yeah, uh, there's a little more difficult parts with that because playing against top teams is how smaller schools like even break even financially, and I think that'll without that there's going to definitely be a huge uh, even more of a top like in everybody's calling for a salary cap in the MLB because only certain teams can spend. Same things with NIL deals, like that will hurt smaller teams, but if they are maybe making this more of a league, then I don't know if they're going to really care about that. One final thing before we get to announcing. I guess we're not announcing, but we're reacting. Finn, you had mentioned the bye. You don't like the bye. I'm basically just asking, seeing with how the buys worked in the MLB playoffs and in other sports where there is a bye, how do we feel about the bye week in the college football playoff?
It might be a disadvantage to have the bye, honestly, because college football is a game. You know, you have momentum. It's a lot like college basketball. Like when teams are hot, they stay hot. And when you're a team that's not playing for like what 2 weeks, 3 weeks, you're not gonna be as sharp. So it might be a little bit of disadvantage having the bye, but I mean, also you get to rest, you get to get all your plays right. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I don't really know how I feel about the bye quite yet because I haven't really seen how it pays off, but I can definitely understand the not liking it because it does make a lot of sense.
Finn, I'm assuming you don't think the bye is that much of an advantage.
I
I
agree. I
don't
said it wasn't.
think it's that much of either.
Yeah.
Yeah. You see it in the NFL teams coming off of bye weeks. Sometimes they'll really just hit the ground running off of bye weeks. I think it's really important to say that that's not the situation we're working with here. These are teams that are obviously playing really well, and that extra time off does matter because they're not teams that are struggling that are going to get a week to recollect themselves. They're teams that are playing really well. To you know, and they're just kind of getting a week off that other teams aren't. I will now pull up the results. All right, I have pulled up the college football playoff results. This is Tuesday night. I hope these. I doubt I'm on the wrong thing. Okay.
Go 1 through 12.
Yeah. I'm gonna go 1 through 20, just to see the outsiders who probably won't make it, but there could be
One
some
through 20.
shifting. There could be some shifting with the
Oh, so you're gonna go
what's it
20 to
called?
1 or 1 through 20? Oh, okay,
One
right,
through
right, right.
20, because there
Yeah,
could
I
be
got you now. I
shifting.
got you. Yeah, I got you. I got
Yeah.
you. I got you. I got you.
Okay. Number 1, Oregon.
All right.
Number 2,
Okay.
Texas. Number 3, Penn State. Number 4, Notre Dame.
Okay.
Number 5, Georgia.
All right.
Number 6, Ohio State. Number 7, Tennessee. Number 8, SMU. Number 9, Indiana.
Okay.
Number 10, Boise State.
Wow.
Number 11, Alabama. Number 12, Miami. Number 13, Ole Miss. Number 14, South Carolina. Number 15, Arizona State. 16 Iowa State, 17 Clemson, 18 BYU, 19 Mizzou, and 20 UNLV.
How the hell is Miami in the top 12? They haven't played anybody, and they lost twice.
How did Ohio State jump? I don't understand how Ohio State moved up after playing a horrible game. Horrible game against Michigan.
I thought they went down. I thought they were 2 before that.
They were 2 before that.
Oh,
Sheldon.
I don't know how they're above Tennessee. That's what I mean. I don't understand how they're above Tennessee. That's shocking.
Because I believe they still have record on Tennessee. Also, I do agree with you. I think Tennessee should be above them.
They're both 10-2. That makes no sense. That was the biggest game of the season against let's be frank, a terrible Michigan team with not a good quarterback. The quarterback definitely had under 110 passing yards. That game was not won in the air. You scored 10 points. You scored 10 points against a Michigan team, and you were at home. What? And then Miami as well. That's crazy. Miami over South Carolina and Ole Miss is. Well, I guess, man, I don't know. Finn, you want to talk about Miami first?
Yeah. They haven't played anybody. They've lost twice. That's not all that better than these 9-3 schools that have played. Let's see. Minimum 4 top 25.
I'd just say who you're referring to because.
Ole Miss and South Carolina.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hold on here.
Okay.
Because this is a little shocking to me. This is just not a good Miami team, especially on defense. They're giving up a lot of yards. They're 25th. They're giving up 338 yards a game. They just got torched by Syracuse and Kyle McCord. They're going to get smoked by whoever they play in the playoffs, especially if it's going to be a team like Tennessee or Georgia or Ohio State, a team with a decent quarterback, good receivers. Cam Ward's good and all, but he's not going to be able to outperform good defenses. You look at Miami, I don't know if you can find a really great defense on their schedule. Their hardest game that they played that they haven't lost, I don't know, maybe Duke. I guess Duke's pretty good with Malik Murphy. But it's just kind of shocking, man. It's a lot of bias. I think Cam Ward, it definitely helped them get that ranking for sure. There's a lot of hype around him. But that's just not making a lot of sense to me. This is a Miami team that's, like I said, top tier fraudulent. I think for sure. Hopefully this will change by next week, because there's barely been a game they haven't given up more than 14 points, more than 21 points, except for FCS schools or FSU, who has basically played like FCS school this whole year. So.
Yeah.
Let me ask you guys this real quick. How Miami they were 9-win team or a 10-win team? I forgot.
They're 10-2.
Okay. How much better do y'all feel they are compared to like a Duke in their exact conference?
How much better they are than Duke?
Yeah, in their conference. Same conference.
2
wins.
They did smoke Duke.
They did
put up
smoke
53 points against Duke. I don't know. I think the question more should be like, if you stack them up against these SEC schools, like South Carolina, for example, I think you should put South Carolina ahead of Miami. And if you're putting South Carolina ahead of Miami, then you also need to put Ole Miss above Miami. And also, how is Miami's not even going to their conference championship?
Yeah.
Like, what? Like that doesn't make
They
any
choked that,
sense.
giving up 40 points to Syracuse.
Yeah,
It's almost
Syracuse does
like
have a good passing offense, though. That's what I'm worried about. Against good passing offenses, they will get smoked and give up that amount of points.
for Miami, it's very likely that they're just going to make the playoffs regardless of what happens, because if SMU loses, do they fall out in your guys' opinion?
They shouldn't go below Miami, that's for sure. Like I said, SMU has one loss, and that one loss was to a BYU team. Week 2 of the season, they lost by 3 points. Okay, this is back when BYU was one of the teams that was about to compete for the Big 12 championship. They had a lot of hype at the beginning of the season. They're honestly a really good team in my opinion. They're in the top 20 rank. Did they make the top 20? I don't know if you mentioned them, but they're
They
definitely
were
in the top 25.
2019.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a top 20 team they lost to. Miami has both of their losses are against unranked opponents. So I mean, if you put Miami in over SMU after they lose, I mean, it's not conspiracy saying it's rigged, because it would obviously be just it'd be like how Bama has been put in the playoffs in the past couple of years, just straight bias, and it shouldn't happen. There's no there in my mind. There's no way Miami should be in this playoffs, nor should they deserve to be in this playoffs because they haven't earned it.
That's the one thing that I would like about the formula. I don't think numbers can be biased.
Mm-hmm. And you had just mentioned Alabama. In a situation where SMU loses, Clemson might not even make it, and Miami is the ACC school to make, or Clemson would probably make it
Yeah,
still then.
because Clemson would win.
They would probably be a top 4 ranked conference
Yeah,
championship.
exactly.
So,
Yeah.
but would Miami then be the top ranked ACC school?
Well, we have to think that doesn't a doesn't is Boise State the Power 4 bid, or are they an at large bid? Because doesn't a group of 5 bid get a spot too, or is that going to be what Boise State's doing?
Finn?
Because I might be mistaken, but I think it's all 12, but then like the 12th ranked team doesn't get in because it's only 11, because the 12th spot is taken by the conference championship in a group of 5. Let me check real quick.
Yeah, come back with that one. For those who don't know,
Yeah.
college football is not my expertise. It's just, this is something that we are clearly passionate about. You had mentioned Alabama. Alabama, specifically in context at BYU at the time, BYU beat, or earlier in the season, they were a really strong team, and losing to BYU at the end of the season, or at the beginning of the season, was a lot bigger of a deal than now. Specifically with Alabama, with how they finished the season, how do we feel about like a team that really struggled to the end of the year? Like,
Okay, hold
how do we
on.
feel about that? Go ahead.
Can I share my screen real quick?
Yeah.
All right, you can see that. You can see my
Yeah.
screen. Okay. So this is what we're looking at right now. So Miami's out. ASU gets the at-large bid, and Boise State gets the top 4. And then so Boise State, since they're better than ASU, they get a bye. ASU is the one conference championship bid team that's not going to get a bye this year.
Okay.
So we're looking
Makes
at this.
And then with Georgia, Alabama. Okay.
Yeah.
So, furthering on that Alabama thing.
Yeah, sorry.
How do we feel about a team that has maybe struggled a lot more, like towards the end of the season? specifically, like did they have identical records to Old Miss and South Carolina, also in the SEC?
Yeah, I believe so. I think they were both 9-3, 9-3.
Okay. How do we feel about the team that struggled at the end of the year in Alabama making it over those two teams, or them at least getting the edge over those teams um, by a decent margin, from 11 to 14 and 13? I guess with just Miami between them, but
I don't like it. I feel like I have to consider that, but I'm picking the top 12 best teams. I'm talking about best right now. Goes
yeah,
back to why we conclude injuries when they're critical, like a quarterback.
yeah,
Yeah, I don't know, it might be crazy to say, but I think that Ole Miss deserves it more than Bama does when you look at it. They played same common opponents. South Carolina, they only beat by 2 points when Ole Miss like killed them. I think it was like a 24-point win, if I'm not mistaken. Um, they played Georgia. So this is going to be some very rough numbers real quick because I'm getting them
not in the fly.
very on the fly. So Bama beat Georgia by like I think it was 6 points or not 6 points, but Georgia lost to Ole Miss by 18, and then they only beat Georgia by 7. Bama did. So I mean, there's a bunch of other numbers, but I'm gonna be here all day trying to figure go back and forth with same common opponents. But Ole
With
Miss,
them in South Carolina, how do you take into account that bad reffing is possibly why they lost that LSU game?
yeah, I don't know. I think that what would be more taken into account is the fact that Lenore Sellers was injured during the second half. Um, I think that I know that South Carolina fans are trying to push a narrative that they belong in the playoffs. I just really don't see how they can make it. Like in all honesty, how can you make it over one, a team that blew you out, and two, a Bama team that beat you? I talked about how head-to-head records should be uh, considered by the committee in great length, and if you take that into consideration, South Carolina can't jump it. Even though that's not to discredit their season at all, it's been one of the best in my recent memory. But I think that if you're the committee, you're putting Bama in the playoffs again when maybe Ole Miss deserves to be in it. But we'll see what happens in the SEC championship because maybe
Me,
Georgia
I
should.
have I have Ole Miss over the Gamecocks, but I don't have Alabama over the Gamecocks because of some just bad down the line play, and that it was only 2 points.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think that's valid.
I have Ole Miss above them because that was more than 2 points. That was we got our ass kicked. That was just bad.
yeah,
Yeah, if it's not clear, Finn's a South Carolina fan. Uh, I don't even, Sheldon, where's your
Baylor, we have a very
Baylor?
good season this year. We
I
could have
should know.
made it. All the chips didn't fall, but I think we only had like 3 or 4 losses this year. Put BDA to Kansas. I've been seeing we're going to play like Arkansas or LSU in the playoffs, or maybe Clemson or in the bowl game. So I'm excited for that.
Okay. Do y'all have any huge other thoughts around the results here?
I think I mean if this is if this playoffs right now, what I'm looking at, there's some very interesting matchups for sure because there is not a crazy world where ASU comes in and beats Penn State and then has to beat Boise State to make it to the semifinals. Not saying I mean it's going to be really hard because I think home don't you get home field advantage in the playoffs? I think you get home field advantages in the playoffs. So
And
going into Penn State, it's going to be really tough for an ASU team. But they're a fun team that can do it. Indiana Georgia is a great matchup. I think that's another matchup that Indiana can beat them. Even though they struggled against Ohio State, I think that they can turn around. They have a great head coach. And then the Tennessee Ohio State game would be fun, man. Especially if Nico is on point like he was against Vanderbilt at certain times. It's going to be interesting. And then Boise State. Let's see if they're a real team or if they're really just getting carried by Ashton Genty. I think that Ashton Genty teams are going to try to figure him out, but I think he's going to prove why he's a Heisman candidate and like why he should deserve the Heisman. I think if he can play, I don't know. I think the Heisman comes out in like January or late December. So I think that if he can maybe prove something, he might be able to beat Travis Hunter. But he's a great running back, man. And their quarterback, even when they stack the box, I think that he can get it done. People are underrating him a little bit. So this is going to be a really fun playoffs because really we don't know what could happen because every team has showed really bad play at some point, and every team has showed really good play. The ability to lose like really bad games and win amazing ones. I think we're in for a real thriller.
Agree. We'll see. Maybe we do more college football episodes. Maybe not super frequently, but from time to time we might do it. Same thing with NFL. We'll probably do one before the playoffs. Finn, do you have anything real quickly? I know I didn't give you a chance to speak.
You know how Sheldon was talking about BYU earlier?
Yeah.
I argue they're better than Miami.
Okay.
Could make a case
because they lost to a ranked team and they only had one loss.
Yeah. Okay.
Miami is it, and they're nowhere to be seen.
Yeah.
Yeah, BYU got hurt by Kansas. If they didn't lose to Kansas, their only loss would be to ASU, and they'd probably be in that Big 12 championship as well. That's why I think SMU is like criminally underrated as well. They've gotten things going down there in Texas. They figured out their quarterback situation. Like I said, man, it's going to be crazy playoffs. People should strap in and grab their popcorn for sure.
So furthermore, something that might be interesting is we might create our own formula. Maybe not this year, but maybe next year, if we have a lot more time to create a formula that we could compare to the actual results. That's a possibility for next year. This should be going up as on a really late on a Tuesday. Next podcast episode will be Finn and I 2 days from now on a early off-season MLB episode. We will see you guys then. Do you guys have anything before we wrap this one up? All right.
I think we need to fire the committee. We need to have a committee of just. We need to have it to be a bunch of. If that's accurate, we need it to be a bunch of retired coaches, retired players, maybe even a few retired referees.
It probably is, but like, I don't know.
All right.
I think Finn said, maybe it should be like Kirk Herbstreit, Pat McAfee. get all the goons up there.
Just not Shaquille O'Neal or his equivalent in the football field. Yeah, that'll do for this episode. We'll see you in a couple days for the MLB episode, and then we will return for NBA episode with Sheldon and I. So we will see you guys then.